Welcome to Powerhouse Podcast. I'm your host, Ron Herman, and today we have Brad Dacus of the Pacific Justice Institute, and we're going to be talking about religious freedom, separation of church and state. Tune in.
Welcome to the Powerhouse Podcast, presented to you by Sac Life TV. Here's your host, Pastor Robert Jones.
Welcome to another episode of Powerhouse Podcast. This is your host, Ron Herman, sitting in for Robert Jones, and our co-host, Joanne Johnson.
Hello.
Good to see you today.
Thank you for joining us.
In today's episode, we have a lawyer with us, Brad Dacus of the Pacific Justice Institute. Brad, tell us about what you do for our community and for our nonprofits and organizations that are having trouble with respect to getting legislation because they're faith-based organizations.
Yeah, we at Pacific Justice Institute, I founded it back in 1997 with the help of former U.S. Attorney General Ed Meese. He still serves as chairman of our advisory board. And we are very unique in that, we defend religious freedom for everyone, parents' rights when dealing with government issues, social workers or public schools and those kinds of issues. And then we also deal with the sanctity of human life. So we go to bat and defend wonderful, benevolent, pro-life clinics in communities doing wonderful work to help women in crises. We do all our work without charge. And what makes us particularly unique is that we don't just cherry pick a few high-profile cases. Our goal is to make sure that no one is ever left on the side of the road, ever. So we work to make sure that everyone gets help. And we have also something very unique, which is 36 offices in 26 states, coast to coast. But we started right here in Sacramento.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So this is our legal headquarters. This is where I started it. And all of our offices have donated office space. All of our radio, television broadcasting, it's all donated airtime. And it's been really exciting to see how God has been able to allow us to help so many people. Right now we have more than 260 cases in active litigation. Some of those cases involve more than 100 clients in the case. So we're helping lots and lots of people with a huge, unique footprint all across the nation, always without charge, and making a real difference.
This is awesome. It's like you've built an empire for the good of working with Christ, getting these legislations changed. I see that you've been all over. You've been on Fox News. You've been on Good Morning America. Been on Tucker Carlson. All these things. But you didn't start off this big. You started off small. Let's get the backstory here. Let's go back to the beginning. Where did you get your degree? What pushed you in this direction? As a lawyer, you've got plenty of options. You could be a criminal lawyer, you could be an injury lawyer, you could be this lawyer, that lawyer, but you chose to go down this path in particular. Let's hear the backstory on that.
Well, originally I was going to go to seminary, actually.
Oh, you become a pastor.
Yeah, all my family, everyone knew Brad's going to be a pastor, be a preacher someday. And I sought the Lord on it. I was working for U.S. Senator Phil Gramm as a legislative assistant in Washington, D.C., and I'm praying about it, seeking counsel, fasting, in the Word. And the more I sought the Lord, the stronger my desire was to go to law school, more than I could rationally explain. I guess that's what you would call a calling, if you will. And it didn't make sense, which is one indicator that it's from the Lord, because God does not always make sense from the way we're looking at things. And I just sort of had to step out in faith, say, this is where God wants me to go. I don't fully understand why. Maybe He wants me to be a prosecutor. I don't know why, what exactly. But so I did that, and I went to University of Texas School of Law, one of the top 20 in the country. God blessed me with the opportunity to go there. And while I was there, I interned with an organization back east called Rutherford, and I thought, this is my dream, defending religious freedom, parents' rights. 30 years from now, when I'm really qualified and competent to do this important work, that's what I want to do someday. Fast forward, I'm working here in Sacramento for a law firm.
Is that what brought you here from Texas, the law firm? Or
law firm, and my folks were living here at the time. Okay. And I flew out to visit my folks, and I was licensed to practice in Texas, and I flew out to visit them, and my mom ever so wisely set up an interview with a law firm because she wanted me out here, and it worked.
Our mother.
Oh, yeah.
Mother.
And it worked. But 5 months into that firm, I get a call. Working for that firm, I get a call from the organization back east called Rutherford, and they said, Brad, we'd like you to open up a Western regional office for us, coordinating litigation in 14 Western states, defending religious freedom, parents' rights, sanctity of life. I said, I was speechless. And he goes, well, that's okay. We'll fly you out here. I said, I'm busy this month. He goes, how about next month? Okay. So I fly out there and I said, let me tell you the 5 reasons, Mr. Whitehead, why I am not competent and you should choose someone else. I worked.
You're trying to back yourself out of a job here, right?
I was trying to use my sales skills to sell myself out of the job because I was convinced there were better people for the job than me, and the work was simply too important. And he said,
very humble.
And he said, he goes, Brad, he goes, it's really not between you and me. I'm already convinced that you're the one for the job. It's really just between you and God now. So I prayed about it.
Kind of laying it out there for you.
Yeah, so I prayed about it, flew home, prayed about it, and the conclusion I came with was just, that's it, God, I'm not qualified, I'm not competent. Case closed, and I went to stand up to go make the phone call to reject the job. And before I could, this sounds a little weird, but before I could, the Lord interjected in my mind, that's the whole point, I've heard that line before. And I don't hear God speaking to me every day. I don't, say, God, what should I order on this menu today? I mean, this is one of those interception kind of things that was needed because I was headed in the wrong direction. I was about to do the wrong thing. And so I sat down and I realized that God chooses incompetent people by the world's standards to do his work because he's glorified all the more because of it. Whether you're looking at Moses or Paul or just David, it's all throughout Scripture. So I said, okay, God, fine, but this is not a molehill, this is a mountain, and you're gonna have to move it. And he did, and in 5 years, I developed out of the Sacramento office for Rutherford, a huge team of attorneys covering 14 states, from Fairbanks, Alaska to Yakima to, everywhere. And then after 5 years, the organization constricted dramatically, and they said, Brad, we're gonna have to shut down the last regional offices, including yours, but we don't want to lose you, we want to give you a promotion. But they offered me a promotion to head up their public affairs office in Washington, D.C. I was going to be the media point man for all of the cases, all their litigation. I was going to be the face of the organization. In Washington, D.C., a higher salary, larger staff, larger office, testifying before Congress. I'd already worked for U.S. Senator Phil Gramm, so it just looked perfect. So I said, yes. I thought, I don't have to pray about this. God's obviously closing one door, opening another one. You have to pray about those things. And then I had insomnia. Next night, insomnia. Next night, insomnia. Finally, I said, oh, shoot, I've got to pray. This is what my attitude was, And so I knelt to pray, and the Lord quickly this time just hit me over the head with this question, which is, what desires have I put on your heart? And the answer was to make sure people got the help where it was needed the most here on the West Coast. So I said, okay, God, fine, I'll do this. I'll start a nonprofit on several conditions. I was scared. You know what's neat about God is he takes us right where we are. He knows I'm scared. He wants us just to be honest. I said, God, I am scared. So I'll do this. On a few conditions, I got to make sure you're behind us. So I need to have free office space donated, free computer system, keep me on the radio stations for free. There were 2 at the time that interviewed me weekly. We have to be in the black in just 3 months.
Well, you're giving a lot of, it's not more than God can provide.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Oh, and the final one is I'm never going to charge anyone at any time for any work we ever do, ever.
That's a kicker right there.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest.
Oh, yeah. So interesting. God came through on all of them. And the office space was a really incredible miracle because I thought, I don't have to tell anyone I'm looking for a free office space. I told God, if God's behind this, he'll give me the office space. I don't have to lift a finger. I don't tell anyone. And I get this call out of the blue, and the guy says, I hear you need free office space, and I've got office space for you. Now, instead of saying, oh, praise the Lord, no, I said, how'd you know I need office space? I had sort of a Jonah attitude. The guy got swallowed up by the whale because he had an attitude issue. So, I says, how'd you know I need office space? And my voice was so loud and crass, but my secretary comes in, Pamela, sweet person. She goes, oh, Brad, could you put him on hold? I said, can I put you on hold? Okay, great, thanks. Yes, what, Pamela? She goes, well, you don't know this, but before I knew they were shutting our office down, I knew our lease was going to be expiring in just 2 months. So 2 months ago, I thought I'd surprise you, and I called KYCC Radio, asked to put a pre-public service announcement that we're looking for free office space. And that was not her. That was not Pamela. And that was the Lord, because he knows ahead of time
What you needed.
and he knew my attitude ahead of time, because he's free from the dimensions of time and space. We have an awesome God.
And your list of conditions was kind of maybe your secret way out.
Yes.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, exactly. Bullseye. Joanne, you're absolutely right. That's exactly right. I thought, make all these
This can't
conditions.
happen. He's like,
This, and this. And God came through in all of them. So we got the office space, we got the equipment, the computer equipment, radio stations. They said, oh yeah, we'll keep you on. Everything just blossomed. And fast forward, we now have, like I said, 36 offices in 26 states. My half-hour radio show, the Dacus Report, is on over 800 radio outlets by God's grace. The Legal Edge, over 1,000. It's commentary. Then we have Faith and Law, which you guys carry, which I'm so grateful, and it's on at least 40-plus networks. And then we have his channels, Brad Dacus Live, streaming, and then some other networks and things. So God has just taken this, and what's really exciting is that if I had a real rich uncle, in Texas, a millionaire, oil-rich uncle, and said, Brad, I'll give you $1 million, do God's work. I wouldn't know for sure if it was the Lord or if it was just me. But the way God set it up, because he knew the challenges I was going to be facing in the years ahead, he made it real crystal clear. This is his baby, not mine. And I can rest at night no matter what challenges I'm facing, because I know he is behind it, and he has proven himself over and over and over again to be faithful.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
And there's a real joy when we're obedient. Sometimes God will, sort of have to give us an attitude adjustment, and like he did me, because I just thought this is just too big for me. But the key is when I realized it's not about me, it's all about him, and to see what he wants me to do. And when we move forward, when we finally say, okay, God, I'm going to do it, there's a real joy and peace that comes with obedience. And when we decide not to, at the end of the day, we're not happy. So it's an exciting life being a Christian when we surrender our lives to the Lord, and we can really have our trust and confidence in him and what he's going to do.
Now, you've got all these offices, all these lawyers working for you. Obviously, there's this expense in that. We're talking here about nobody pays. This is all basically a pro bono work.
Right.
And so, that's a lot of cases, a lot of manpower, a lot of research for all these. Sometimes you say you've got 100 plaintiffs in class action suits. Wow. I mean, if you don't mind me asking, let's go into how are you funded? And if it's donations and stuff, how can people here, contribute to the cause?
I appreciate that question. And we are donated. We receive donations from moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, churches. Some churches get behind us, which is really great. They see our work and they say, hey, we want to get behind you. We see the results. People, I think, are particularly drawn to the fact that we're, like I said before, we don't just cherry pick a few cases that look good and are going to be high profile. We have those cases, and we've had Supreme Court cases before, big victories. But our goal and our heart is unique to make sure that everyone gets help. And when people see that, and they see how their nephew was assisted, and how their church was helped, and this and this and that, and how a local business owner, how we helped him be able to further the gospel through his business legally and defended him. It makes a real difference. So that people see the work and they respond to the desire that God's put on their heart. We're very, very careful not to ever coerce anyone or use gimmicks or tactics. God doesn't need those. If God's behind us, he's going to take care of us. And so, but we are very grateful and appreciative to anyone who chooses to support us. We're tax deductible. We're a 501c3. And so it's sort of exciting to be able to give to a support an organization that's a 501c3 organization, and at the same time, an organization that's having a major direct impact on so many issues and so many quadrants, whether it's legislation or litigation, empowering with results, or directly equipping the churches in unique ways. And those are 4 different facets of Pacific Justice Institute.
Well, I'm assuming, I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of the cases that you take on pro bono, obviously, that you win, you're not asking anything, but a lot of these organizations that you have fought for and been victorious probably give back to the organization, I would think. It's part of the donatorship. Yeah,
the nonprofit parachurch ministries generally don't, because they're trying to do their thing, and which we rejoice in. So we've had partnerships with different ministries to help them along. The American Christian Schools International, the largest private Christian school organization, we're like their legal arm. And we rejoice in being able to serve them. When they shut down the private schools across the country, we stepped up and we had a Zoom training for principals all across the country on how they can open up their schools much faster than what their attorney general is telling them. And so we've done that. Another ministry is Decision Point. Wonderful youth ministry, outreach ministry. Just here in Sacramento, my wife and I did the first revival rally at a public high school, I think ever.
Wow, public high school.
On school grounds, during school time. I know how to do it legally. And we wrote a book called Reclaim Your School, which talks all about that. Well, a gentleman saw that, came up from Campus Crusade. He says, I want to replicate this. I can't believe what I just saw. Make a long story short, a ministry called Decision Point was born, and now they're all over the country having a huge impact on outreach weeks across the country with thousands of kids coming to Jesus every year.
You said that this is God's baby, and what he was looking for was a willing vessel. And your yes is opening up all these doors and all these opportunities for God to touch our culture.
Yeah, it's exciting to be able to do that, and we love helping also Christian business organizations. So I just came back from an FCCI, Fellowship of Corporations for Christ International, wonderful organization. We love to invest in organizations like CBMC, Convene, to empower business owners on how they can legally evangelize their customers, their employees, their community. And then we not only say you can do this, but with every advice, all the advice we give, we say not only can you do this, but we'll represent you if you have any kickback from the government without charge.
That's fantastic. You know, we're going to wrap up this first section. We've learned about who you are and what you do. Let's go into the second session. Let's talk about some of the organizations and some of the cases loads that you take and this issue of separation of church and state. Is it getting worse, or are we getting better? Let's leave that up to the next section. Thank you for tuning in to SAC Live TV's Powerhouse Podcast. And remember, our sponsor, Mosley Collins, All Fours for Legal Help. We'll be right back.
We would like to thank Mosley Collins for sponsoring Powerhouse Podcast. And if you are in need of any legal help, please dial 916-444-4444. All fours for legal help. Thank you, Mosley, for your support.
SAC Live TV is proud to sponsor the Powerhouse Podcast with Pastor Robert Jones. If you'd like to be a sponsor, please contact us at info@saclife.tv.
Are you looking for substance in your podcasts? Look no further. Introducing the Powerhouse Podcast. Join us every week as we delve into politics, religion, entertainment, and education. Don't miss out. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform and be part of the Powerhouse Podcast community. For more information, visit our website, powerhousepodcast.net.
Second part of Powerhouse Podcast today with our guest, Brad Dacus, and we're talking about the Pacific Justice Institute. We just covered about the history of the Institute, and I'd like to go into a very sensitive subject, which is that separation of church and state. The Constitution, did we get it? Are we honoring what the Constitution really meant to do, or has it been corrupted and changed to do that separation and keep things apart? If you remember, anybody that's my age, remember you used to be able to pray in public schools, and you would have the 10 Commandments up, and I believe that was before we started having school shootings. It seems that all this violence that's taken place in our schools and these shootings and all this stuff came in the generations after we eliminated having some kind of faith in our community to help balance and keep us basically on the good side of anything. So, Brad, open it up to you on that.
Oh, certainly. Well, the concept of separation of church and state is nowhere in the Constitution. And however, though, we had some what I call activist justices on the Supreme Court who were laying claim to this. It comes down to a case in the 1940s. I'm not going to get too technical here. I don't want to bore your audience, but the phrase was mentioned in a case, and actually it was in a case that was actually accommodative towards religion, but it just was thrown in. Well, then from that language, courts built on it the concept that if government's involved, then it has to be sterilized and free from faith or religion. Well, as government continued to grow and expand, then it began to squeeze out the ability for faith to have the same equal playing field. Separation of church and state. So
But weren't we based on it? I mean, go back to the Constitution and our founding fathers. I mean,
Yeah, well, we did. We weren't. But the founding fathers, as far as original intent goes, when they established the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, it basically says that Congress, actually it only limited it to the federal government, to Congress, can make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And so it was basically to make sure that our federal government did not become like the King of England and have an established church state, favoring one religion or religious group over another. That was the whole purpose of the Establishment Clause. When I was in law school at the University of Texas, I wrote basically a dissertation, if you will, on that issue, on that topic, saying we need to go back to original intent. It needs to be based on preventing the government from taking action that is exclusive in endorsing and proselytizing one particular religious belief and doctrine over another. The Supreme Court, after the 3 appointments by former President Donald Trump, it was pivotal in the direction of our Supreme Court that we have today. And they looked at this whole issue and they said, let's go back to original intent. This is simply to limit government from endorsing and proselytizing one faith over another. It doesn't prevent faith from flourishing in the open marketplace of ideas, whether it's a government platform or non-government platform. So it's been a huge breakthrough, and we have more religious freedom now to live our faith and share our faith than at any time in my lifetime because of those 3 appointments by former President Donald Trump and the other appointments on the circuit courts, the district courts. It's a game changer, a huge game changer in terms of religious freedom. Also in terms of parental rights, they said they're starting to rule on these issues, but it's a great precursor to what's to come when they ruled that, look, states like Maine, Montana, if you're going to give vouchers to parents to be able to choose private schools, you got to let them be able to choose religious schools as well. And that's, I think, is going to be the beginning of more and more parents' rights protection. And then, of course, the sanctity of human life, the reversal of Roe versus Wade, kicking it back to the states. That is the proper jurisprudence of original intent. And I believe it's a blessing because we, the people, will be able now to debate the issue, legislate the issue accordingly, and we won't have an oligarchy of elitists of the Supreme Court making a pronouncement that is not supported by the Constitution. Things that are not supported by the Constitution, that needs to be left up to the states. And so that was a wonderful victory as well. And we've already seen over 130,000 babies' lives saved and protected because of that decision, bringing it back to the states, and states like Texas and others acting responsibly with regard to protecting the preborn.
That's wonderful. So now we talk about, one of the things I'm looking at is financial backing. They say when organizations that are faith-based want to get funding from governmental agencies, no, separation of church and states, we can't fund that. But if it was being able to fund all different faith groups, then that should be legal if that's the way, because that's the way the Constitution is. I couldn't give money just to the Christian organization if I'm a government entity, but if I have that money available to all faith groups, then we could do that. That's the way it should be set up. But it's been made so I don't give it to anybody. So that's kind of the way that it's been manipulated.
Yeah. So case law for the Supreme Court for a good while was saying, if there's anything religious about this entity, government can't support it or fund it in any way, shape, or form. Then we have case law saying, wait a minute, it's okay, like for example, in food distribution places, it's a ministry, it's Christian-based or religious-based, but they're doing something, they're providing food and they want funding to be able to provide food for low-income people in the neighborhood. The court says, well, as long as the money is being used for a secular purpose, it's okay that it's funneling through a religious ministry that has other things that they do, like have a church service or this or that or whatever. They said, as long as the tax money is not being used to propagate a particular religion. Well, now we may be at a different point where I could see the Supreme Court in the future ruling, you know what, as long as they're not just saying one particular religious group gets this grant funding, but it's open to any and all religious groups and secular groups, so long as they meet the objective criteria of doing X, Y, and Z, it doesn't matter. So I think we're going to see even a broader release by the Supreme Court, which was really what was intended by the Constitution. So long as they're not just singling out endorsing one religious group over another, I believe the Supreme Court is going to use that principle and apply it to also funding programs as well down the road. But I'm sort of looking into the future as I'm saying that.
That's good. I mean, go ahead.
More examples of maybe some types of legislation that you've had to fight against to protect religious freedom?
Oh, I'd love to. First off, we'll talk about some of the blue states. So some of the blue states, there was a law that was, a bill that was pending that was going to basically make it illegal for police officers to attend most churches.
What?
And yes, and it was hideous. But what it basically said was that law enforcement cannot be affiliated with organizations that do not have a progressive position supporting LGBTQ.
Oh boy.
Wow.
Now, well, of course, most churches are Bible believing, and the Bible has very clear positions about different actions and activities that are not pleasing to the Lord. And so this would have prevented police officers from attending most churches because most churches preach from the Bible. And we spelled it out very clearly how it was unconstitutional. And they quickly, the committee said, whoa, we didn't realize this. And the author said, I didn't realize that this was broad. Okay, table it. So we've done that. We've also had to challenge legislation. So there was a legislation passed by the state of California that said that clinics helping women where the clinics are not doing abortions, but are actually focusing on alternatives to abortion. They said, well, those clinics, they have to have a large sign in the waiting room telling women where they get a free or low-cost abortion and the phone number to call. That's like having Alcoholics Anonymous have to post a big sign saying where you get free beer and hard liquor.
Yeah.
It's totally counter to the calling and desires of that private ministry. So
Basically stacking the deck against you.
yeah, and we couldn't stop it from being passed. So then we went ahead and we've always followed through. Whenever we say we're going to sue, we always sue. And that's just what we did. We were the first to file a lawsuit. Others joined in, which was great. It went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, really? This is unconstitutional. This is government bullying private entities doing what they feel called by God to do. Unconstitutional. We had another action by Governor Gavin Newsom that we had to challenge.
Sure you did.
And this was dealing with the shutdown of synagogues and churches and mosques all across the state of California. Now, initially, when we had the pandemic, we had the shutdown of everything. Well, in the red states, more I call the freedom-loving states, they decided to, at one point, okay, let's open everything up and let's open the churches and synagogues and up with everyone else, the liquor store and everything else. But California and other blue states had a different tactic. They said, okay, now time's gone by, we'll open up the liquor stores, the strip clubs, entertainment, restaurants. Oh, but those churches and synagogues, we're going to keep those shut down. We're going to treat them differently for no logical reason. So it was very biased. It was prejudicial. We went and moved very aggressively. We have a very aggressive strategy that in the past we haven't attempted because it's very difficult to win when you're seeking, just a temporary restraining order. It's very difficult to get one of these kinds of those facts. We were denied. Then we filed for an emergency writ with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. It was denied. Then we filed for an emergency petition for certiorari with the United States Supreme Court. Normally, it takes months for a case to be heard, sometimes several years by the Supreme Court. We wanted an immediate action. They took it up miraculously, like 1 in 10,000 probability they'd take it up. They took it up. They looked at the case that we brought before them, and in just 3 days, and great things happen in 3 days. Okay, Easter, okay, that's what I'm, okay. In just 3 days, they voted 6-3 and ordered Governor Gavin Newsom open those churches and synagogues now. And he did. And it sent ripples of shockwaves across the country so that states like Oregon, Washington, New York, Illinois quickly followed suit. And that was a major case. Then after that, we had another tidal wave of people of faith being purged from their jobs in the public sector and private sector, not because of anything about work performance or merit, but because of their religious conviction not to take a very controversial experimental vaccination for COVID. We stepped in and we have saved the jobs of not just hundreds or even thousands, but hundreds of thousands of people all across the nation from losing their jobs because of their convictions and faith. And there was no science or statistics to support the intolerant treatment that they were experiencing. We are now prevailing in those cases. More than 90% of these cases we're winning on because the courts are looking at the fact and they're calling out the tyranny of these unjustifiable, medically, scientifically unjustifiable mandates that have ruined and hurt so many people across this country.
I'm sure you're seeing a difference in your ability to win cases from 8 years ago to now with the courts changing their ways. The pendulum is starting to go the other direction. Is that where we're at?
Yes, people need to understand that our courts, our federal judges, they're appointed by whoever's sitting in the Oval Office and approved by the majority of the U.S. Senate. It just takes a mere majority.
Right.
Okay, so it has, and those, people who get elected to office, they come and go. But those judges are going to be sitting there a long time. Mm-hmm. Because of those appointments by the former administration to our federal courts, we now have the best courts in my lifetime, once again, for religious freedom, parents' rights, the sanctity of life. We are all throttle, full forward in our litigation, more aggressive than we've ever been. And it's so positive to see so much taking place in way of case law. Just this last session of the Supreme Court, they did a 3 punches in the gut of our nation's bureaucrats, putting them finally in check in terms of due process for people that they're hitting with the regulations. People can now file a lawsuit challenging any regulation that they feel is unconstitutional. They are protected by federal courts. They don't have to go to a bureaucratic tribunal and then find themselves behind bars and have no opportunity to have a fair federal court hearing. And then they can't just make up rules now, where they just make up a rule and say, yeah, this is a part of the Equal Protection Act or the Environmental Protection Act. No, they have to be able to go into federal court and prove that that law passed by Congress gives them specific authority to adopt those rules. It is a huge game changer for freedom and liberty and for the American people, no matter what their politics or their perspective. We are a freer nation by what the Supreme Court did just a few months ago.
I would think also, through the Pacific Justice Institute, you're making a name for yourself to a point where if legislation is being thought about being changed, that maybe the organizations in the back of their minds now that if we do this, are we going to be confronted with the Pacific Justice Institute and called out on it, which could be a big reason to keep things from even going that direction without even going to court. You've won the battle before it started on reputation. Right,
and I'm glad you mentioned that because for a good while we were just litigating. But now we're going upriver to where the legislation is happening. So we have a full-time attorney who works to provide support for legislators wishing to fight the bad stuff or wishing to adopt legislation that is very positive and proactive. Let me give you some examples. So we worked from our attorney out of Oregon, Ray Hackey. He testified before 6 state legislatures on legislation that would say boys can no longer compete in girls' sports.
Right, that's a big one.
Which Title IX's federal civil rights statute already protects that clearly, and yet we have activists politically and judicially trying to negate the opportunities under Title IX for females. Well, we said, let's let states pass laws protecting women up front, young girls. So we worked, that was passed, also protects girls not to be visually violated in the locker room by a biological boy. So this is very, very important. If schools want to give special accommodation for kids who have gender dysphoria, that's fine, but not at the expense of victimizing girls emotionally and traumatically in different ways.
Have a third sport for that gender.
Yeah, and they're still biologically the same, whether they distort their body with whatever way. But and I think there's good policy decisions that can be made that address that are respectful for everyone involved. And that's what's reasonable. So we got 6 states to adopt this. And then 5 others have since stepped up and done the same. We also worked hard in Louisiana to help them pass a law that says, hey, every public school classroom, kids need to know the heritage of our nation. So we're going to put up the 10 Commandments in every public school classroom, including public universities in the state of Louisiana. We were the ones that stepped up to identify this as constitutional based on the Supreme Court that we have and the case law precedents. We're very optimistic on how that's going to turn out. And then in Texas, I personally flew in to testify for legislation that will allow chaplains, paid chaplains, state-paid chaplains to be on every public school campus that wants them in the state of Texas. And
that's a great resource, especially for people who, again, with shootings and so forth.
And children need that. Now, if children have parents of a family who says, look, we don't want the chaplain talking to our child,
that's fine.
That's fine, and that'll be respected. But the fact is, a lot of kids have a lot of issues that a school counselor cannot address. Because the school counselor can say, well, just feel good about your decision, X, Y, and Z. But they're not able to deal with the guilt, because the guilt comes from a foundation of faith. A chaplain is able to hone in on the faith of that child and help them responsibly be able to reconcile and deal with that guilt in a way that the school counselor, with their often very controversial agendas, could not even dream to take care of.
Well, that's fantastic, Brad. We're going to take a break here, our second break, and come into our third part there. We'll hope to have you guys back as we take a break. And again, you're watching this on SAC Live TV, available on Comcast 20, AT&T 14, Roku, Apple, Amazon. Download our app at your app store and watch on demand. We'll be right back.
We would like to thank Mosley Collins for sponsoring Powerhouse Podcast. And if you are in need of any legal help, please dial 916-444-4444. All fours for legal help. Thank you, Mosley, for your support.
SAC Live TV is proud to sponsor the Powerhouse Podcast with Pastor Robert Jones. If you'd like to be a sponsor, please contact us at info@saclife.tv.
Are you looking for substance in your podcasts? Look no further. Introducing the Powerhouse Podcast. Join us every week as we delve into politics, religion, entertainment, and education. Don't miss out. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform and be part of the Powerhouse Podcast community. For more information, visit our website, powerhousepodcast.net.
Welcome back to Powerhouse Podcast. I'm your host, Ron Herman, sitting in for Robert Jones with Joanne Johnson and Brad Dacus of the Pacific Justice Institute. We've covered a lot of subjects from their history to the constitutional rights of separation of church and space, church and state, And we're going to cover now, we're going to talk about some of the caseload that you are handling. Give us a little bit of an idea of the different kind of, we see here that you cover religious freedom, parental rights, churches, and then business leaders. So where's that business leader kind of drop into this, and how does that affect it with having Christian or values like that?
Oh, you bet. I'll give an example. That's the best way of explaining it.
Sure.
There was a small business in the Salinas area, Southern California, and in this community, this business had like a swimming pool, and they did a training for swimming and the competition, and that's what they did. That was their focus. But they played Christian music. They had Christian things on the wall, but they never discriminated against anyone who wanted those services. Didn't matter. And they had the parents of the child, because this is for young people, sign an acknowledgement that they play Christian music, but at no time will your child ever be required to engage in any religious activity or profession of faith, et cetera, et cetera.
That was actually in their document.
That was in their documents.
It
was well done. Right up front, this is what we are, this is who we are. Well, one atheist parent said, no, my child should be able to have this without ever having to be exposed to anything religious. I'm suing. So she sued. She found an attorney, and they're out there that'll sue for anything for the right price. Files a lawsuit. Someone told that Christian business about Pacific Justice Institute, someone from church that they knew. They contacted us. We stepped in and we represented them without charge, as usual. We fought for 2 years. And after 2 years of intensive, continual litigation, the judge finally says, I'm throwing out and dismissing the case of the plaintiffs. This business has every right to live their faith and share their faith as zealous as they wish in their business, so long as they're not discriminating on the religious of faith on who they're serving or who they're hiring.
Perfect.
And
That's the way it should be.
That's the way,
it.
exactly. So we do these cases. We had a construction contractor up in Oregon. He had a Bible study for his employees. One employee left and sued and says, I was forced to be in the Bible study. Well, he never let the employer know that he didn't want to be in the Bible study. If he had, then he would have been opted out. But this is an important case. We took that on behalf of them, and he prevailed. And then we've had right now an interesting case out of Washington State involving a Korean woman's spa. Now, Korean spa is where they don't wear any clothes. So it's women or men, but not both.
Right.
And for obvious reasons. So it's not a place to go if you have any modesty issues. But it's cultural, and it's owned by Christians in Washington State, up there by Olympia, Washington. Well, a man calls in, and it's clearly the voice of a man. He goes, yeah, I see myself as a woman. I want to go into your spa. They said, well, are you a biological woman? Or she goes, well, I see myself as a woman. Was a man, but now I'm a woman. Okay, you cannot come into our spa. We have mothers and their teenage daughters in the spa, and we cannot allow that. So he goes and files a complaint with the Washington State.
Oh, he knew this was coming. He already knew that.
This is the intolerance,
Yeah.
the hate and intolerance that we see so much from those from this perspective, and it's such a shame. So he files a complaint with the Washington State Human Rights Commission. This is George Orwell's 1984 all over again, where it says one thing, but it really means the opposite. It's the Oppressors Commission. So they order this Korean spa. This is, you let biological males, if they just say they feel like they're a woman, to go in with the naked women, the mothers, their naked teenage daughters, and you have to let these men be naked and expose themselves to these women. That's the order from the state of Washington. And by the way, that's the position of this present administration in Washington, D.C. also, I might add. Yeah. But anyway, so that's what they announced. We stepped in. We were called in, and we stepped in, and we have filed a lawsuit in federal court, and we're going to take this case all the way to Supreme Court if we need to, because business owners should not have to choose between something that is grotesquely violating their faith and just their conscience and humanity, and being able to also run a business and provide for their families. Not in the United States of America.
I can't believe it's been turned upside down like this. Everything right is wrong, wrong is right.
Yeah,
it's just unbelievable the way the direction, and it makes no sense. As common sense Christians, we look at something like that. This should be a no-brainer.
Right.
You don't do that.
Right.
And yet it's allowed. It's just crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And so that's one area we've gotten involved in, helping business owners to live their faith through their business. And we do lectures and speaking to those places. On our website, we have a training video called Faith in the Workplace, 2-part training video to empower and equip them with specifics, not just concepts and principles, but specific how-tos to do different things in their business. But one area on the other spectrum that we're involved in quite a bit, and I want to make sure we mention this, is dealing with social workers, taking children from wonderful families. The Department of Health and Human Services did a study not that long ago, I think it was during the Obama administration, and they came out and declared that most children that are taken by social workers and put into foster care should not be taken.
These guys have too much power in their hands. They assume something, and rather than get the evidence to go through, they have the power to remove somebody.
Right. Most states, including California, do not have adequate due process protection. They have great due process protection for murderers and thieves, et cetera.
Yeah.
But hardly any protection. It's all behind closed doors. There's no video, audio taping required of the child, what the child really said or didn't say. It is an atrocity, a due process civil rights atrocity, what we have in states like California. Other states, red states, are passing laws and bills that we've been behind to give parents rights, the protection that they need to make sure that the child is not wrongfully taken. Because when a child's taken, for whatever reason, there's trauma involved there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tremendous trauma that impacts them for the rest of their lives. And so we at Pacific Justice, we get involved in these cases. Let me give you one example, though, of a new abuse that's taken place, and that is taking children from families because of their religious beliefs. Specifically, it was a girl, and this was in Placer County, specifically, not that far from here.
Yeah.
The girl was in her early teens, and she said to a friend of hers, that she's an early teen, she's just puberty. She says, I really feel like I'm more of a boy than a girl. Her friend tells her teacher tells the school counselor. School counselor calls social workers, CPS. CPS meets with the family, the parents, and says, this is what your daughter feels. How are you going to address that? I said, well, we're Christians, so we're going to get her Christian counseling, and we're going to talk to our pastor, and through the Word of God, give her direction and guidance.
Imagine how that went over.
Oh, yeah. Social worker says, oh, no, you're not. Here's the warrant. I'm taking the child. They took the child, and because a psychiatrist who gets paid by the CPS agencies says, oh, no, we need to take the child, and we need to start the process immediately. Start the injections. Prepare before even age 18 with the cutting off of body parts and mutilation, masochism of this little girl. Just because she said that. So they were going to start the process. They took the girl. They're going to get full state guardianship. By the state of California was pushing this evil. We stepped in, and we got it halted in court before one injection could take place. And we fought this for, once again, more than 2 years of litigation, fighting it and fighting it. She was in a foster home, which I can't get into the details, but it was most unfortunate situation. We defended her, and we fought, all without charge, as usual. And that girl in the last hearing, she said to the judge, Your Honor, actually, I really don't feel like I'm a boy anymore. Because it's a mental condition. Yeah. There's nothing biological or genetic about it. They need counseling. And we succeeded in saving that girl. She went back to her family to live a healthy life. Had we not done that, she would have been permanently sterilized for 6 months.
There's so many people out there being sterilized, and they're seeing right now the traumatic effects of that because they're young, they're too young to make the decision, and when they have the decision made, now they're going through depression because they wish they hadn't made the decision.
Right,
and they're ask those questions first. They just do the action.
Yeah,
and then
they don't require extensive counseling, and even still, children who end up going down that road, people who go down that road, and it's most unfortunate. Their suicide rate is 12 times that of the child who does not go down that road. This is just the facts. The stats are there, much less the biological and medical long-term ramifications. The increase in cancer risk resulting from that. The increase in potential violence that can take place for the female, for example, who has suddenly a burst of testosterone being injected in them, and they have a different brain that processes the testosterone versus the male. And then, of course, the estrogen in a male causes, after 1 to 2 years, serious depression and suicidal ramifications. So we need to be loving and compassionate. We at Pacific Justice, we know the stats, we know the data. Most importantly, we know the rights of parents, and we step in on these cases all without charge. And they are exploding across the nation right now as we speak. And that's why we're glad we have offices coast to coast.
That's fantastic. Well, Brad, we're wrapping up here, and I wanted to full disclosure to our audience of why I invited you here. We used to be SAC Faith TV, an all-faith station amongst what we call PEG stations, the Second Public Educational and Government stations. And these 5 stations get funding from our cable commission annually. In some cases, our KVIE up to $1.5 million, this and that, and the other ones get money. We have been denied funding for the last 25 years because we were a faith-based station. And it's not due, and there's nothing wrong with the cable commission. It's not their fault. It was the legislature law. They were like, we would love to fund you, but we can't because the law, separation of church and state, we can't do this. So it forced us to basically rebrand ourselves as SAC Live TV and do some more besides faith, community outreach, stuff like that, but we weren't there yet. And I'm looking at my schedule, and I see that we've got Law and Faith, your program on, which if you want to see that, it's Friday nights at 6 p.m. on SAC Live TV, Friday night, 6 p.m., Faith and Law with Brad, and I saw it up there, and I went, let's give these guys a call. And I explained to your office here, Matt McReynolds, one of your lawyers here, here's the situation. We've never been funded. We can't get funding. They basically told me that they won't even really talk to me unless I got legal counsel to talk to their legal counsel. Just rules of the game, nothing against them. So I asked Matt, gave him the overview and told him what we'd done. We went in, and with our first meeting with the Cable Commission, we're able to chart out a plan of action that basically said that, all right, if we put a line in the sand, and what you do over here is faith-based, but you fund that yourself internally, and then you do these other things that you want to do that are non-faith, we'll fund that side.
Right.
And so it was a good compromise, and for the first time in 25 years, as of yesterday, because of your organization's intervention, we have just been funded $70,000 that will help us produce some shows that aren't faith-based, but they're community-oriented. We're going to address, it helps support this program. It helps support our community outreach when we're out in the community working with nonprofits and what they're doing. And we're going to do this show next year called Operation PTSD, where we're working with our veterans and the issues they have to go through to suffer with people suffering with PTSD. All this will increase our programming content so that more viewers come onto our station to see who we are, what we're about, and help us survive in the upcoming future of cable and streaming services. So we want to thank you for your organization and what it did for us.
Yeah, it's our pleasure to serve, and I just want to let people know that if they'd like to keep up with our many cases across the country, helping situations just like you mentioned and others, or they'd like to download our article called 12 Steps to Protect Your Children.
Oh, that would be a powerful one, yeah.
Being taken by CPS. Every family should have that one. It's all free on our website, and our e-newsletter is free on our website, and our many resources.
And we'll have this up on a slide, but if you'd like to tell us that slowly, where it can go?
Yeah, just simply go to pji.org, P for Pacific, J for Justice, I for Institute.org, pji.org. We have great empowering resources on there for college students, businesses, employees, etc. And it's all without charge, and we're very grateful to those who choose to become a part of what we're doing and partner with our work at Pacific Justice Institute.
That's wonderful. As we see that pendulum starting to swing back from that far, far direction, I won't give it a name, but as it comes back, your organization is more and more important, and those cases are helping shape the future of our country. And we look forward to seeing more from you and hearing more of the cases. And we probably, the cases that we hear in the Supreme Court are going to be probably because of the interaction that you've done on our behalf. So we thank you.
I just want to say thank you for your obedience to where God has called you. So this is very important.
Fantastic. Brad, thank you again for being a guest on the Powerhouse Podcast. We look forward to seeing what your Pacific Institute is doing in our community, doing in our government. We'll see how that affects things to come. We appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you at our next episode. Have a good day.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Powerhouse Podcast. If today's conversation resonated with you, remember to subscribe, rate, and review us on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps us in our mission to engage in deep conversations that impact mindsets and create a practice of introspection. Do you have an idea or a topic for a show? Message us at php@saclife.tv. Remember, your voice matters, and together we have the power to influence positive change in our world.